I was watching First Take this morning the same way I watch it every morning, half paying attention while I get ready for the day, when something happened that made me freeze in place. I'm talking about completely freeze. One shoe on, one shoe off, toothbrush still in my mouth, staring at my television like I was watching a car chase unfold on live news. Because in the middle of a routine segment about the Raiders offseason, the production team at First Take did something they almost never do. They cut away from the studio, mid-conversation, mid-sentence. Stephen A. Smith was literally in the middle of making a point about the Raiders' wide receiver needs when the director cut to a split screen, and suddenly there was Paul Gutierrez, ESPN's Raiders beat reporter, standing outside the Las Vegas Raiders facility with his phone in one hand and a look on his face that I can only describe as controlled urgency. The kind of look a reporter gets when he knows he's sitting on a massive story but hasn't been given the green light to confirm it yet. And what he said in the next 90 seconds sent shockwaves through the entire show and through every Raiders fan watching at home. He said he was at the facility. He said there was unusual activity. He said he had seen cars in the parking lot that don't normally belong there this early in the offseason program. He said front office personnel were moving in and out of the building with a pace and intensity that suggested something significant was happening. And then he said the words that made my heart stop. He said, "I can't confirm anything at this moment, but everything I'm seeing, every piece of evidence in front of me, points toward the Raiders finalizing a deal to bring in Romeo Doubs. And it could be happening as we speak." Hey, what's up everyone? Real quick before we get into everything, that like button is literally what determines if this reaches hundreds or thousands of fans. Takes 1 second but makes a huge impact on the channel's growth. Just smash that like button right now. It's the easiest thing you can do, but honestly the biggest way to support this content. Every single like pushes this further, so hit it now. The studio erupted. Stephen A's eyes went wide. Shannon Sharpe, who had been sitting calmly waiting for his turn to speak, sat straight up in his chair like someone had just thrown cold water on him. Molly Karam immediately pivoted to breaking news mode, adjusting her tone and her posture to match the gravity of what was unfolding. And for the next 15 minutes, what I watched was one of the most riveting segments of live sports television I've ever witnessed, because Stephen A. and Shannon had completely different reactions to this news, and the debate that followed was electric. But first, let me go back to what Gutierrez described at the facility, because the details matter enormously. He said he arrived at the Raiders facility this morning, expecting a routine day of off-season coverage. Players trickling in for voluntary workouts, coaches running meetings, the standard early April activity that every NFL team goes through at this time of year. But what he found when he got there was different. The parking lot had more cars than usual. Specifically, he noticed vehicles that he associated with agents and representatives, cars he'd seen before at major signing events. He said there were people entering and exiting the facility who he didn't recognize as regular staff members. He said the security posture at the entrance seemed heightened, with additional personnel checking credentials more carefully than normal. And he said that when he tried to reach his usual contacts inside the building for comment, nobody was responding to his text or calls, which in his experience covering the Raiders is a telltale sign that something significant is happening and the organization has gone into information lockdown mode. He also said something that I think was the most revealing detail of his entire report. He said a source close to the situation told him, and I'm paraphrasing here, that there had been a flurry of communication between the Raiders front office and Green Bay over the past 48 hours. And while this source wouldn't confirm the specific player involved, the source said the discussions were advanced and moving toward resolution. Advanced and moving toward resolution. That is not exploratory language. That is not kicking the tires language. That is the deal is almost done language. And when you combine that with the unusual activity at the facility, the agent vehicles in the parking lot, and the information lockdown, the picture becomes very clear. Romeo Doubs is becoming a Raider, probably today. Now back in the studio, Stephen A. reacted first, and he was absolutely fired up about it. He stood up from his chair and said, "This is exactly what the Raiders need. This is the smart move. This is the calculated move. This is the move of a front office that understands what they're building and is adding the right pieces to the puzzle. Romeo Doubs is not a splash signing. He's not gonna blow up your Twitter timeline, but he is exactly the kind of wide receiver that a team with a young quarterback needs. He runs precise routes, he catches the football, he gets open on third down, he's reliable in the red zone, and he's young enough that he can grow with Fernando Mendoza for the next 5 years. This is textbook roster building, and Stephen A. went deeper on the football fit, which I thought was really well articulated. He said the Raiders' biggest offensive problem isn't a lack of speed or explosiveness. It's a lack of reliability. It's a lack of a receiver who consistently gets open on intermediate routes and converts first downs. It's a lack of someone the quarterback can trust to be in the right spot at the right time, run the right route at the right depth, and catch the ball when it arrives. And that's Romeo Doubs' game. That's what he does better than almost any young receiver in the NFL. He's not going to run a 4.3 40. He's not going to make SportsCenter with a one-handed catch over two defenders. But he's going to run a 12-yard comeback route against zone coverage, create just enough separation, catch the ball at the sticks, and move the chains. And in the NFL, moving the chains consistently is how you win games. It's not exciting, it's not flashy, but it's effective, and the Raiders need effective more than they need flashy. Shannon had a completely different reaction, and his argument was fascinating because it wasn't that he disagreed with the player evaluation. He agreed that Doubs is a solid receiver. What he disagreed with was the timing and the prioritization. He said, Stephen A., I don't have a problem with Romeo Doubs as a player. He's a good receiver. He's reliable. He catches the football. All of that is true. But is this really what the Raiders should be spending their resources on right now? They have 7 picks on day 3 of the draft. They've been doing extensive homework on wide receivers for the draft. They have top 30 visits with guys like Denzel Boston, Ted Hurst, Casey Compion, Zachariah Branch, and half a dozen other receivers. Why are you trading for a receiver from Green Bay when you could draft 1 or 2 receivers in 2 weeks and have them on cheaper rookie contracts with more years of team control? The math doesn't make sense to me. And Shannon made a point about the salary cap that I think was important. He said the Raiders don't have a lot of cap space to work with. They're already tight, and Doubs, while not expensive by star receiver standards, is going to cost more than a rookie. Every dollar they spend on Doubs is a dollar they can't spend elsewhere, and with needs at safety, defensive tackle, and other positions, is wide receiver really the most urgent use of limited resources when you're about to have 7 day 3 draft picks, many of which could be used on receivers? Stephen A. countered with what I thought was his strongest argument. He said, Shannon, you're making the rookie mistake of assuming that draft picks are going to come in and contribute immediately. The Raiders are trying to win games this year, not next year, this year. Kirk Cousins is there to compete for the starting job. Fernando Mendoza might start from day 1. Either way, you need a receiver who can play right now, not a guy who needs 2 years to develop his route tree, not a project, not a raw athlete who might be good in 2028. You need a guy who can run a full route tree, who understands NFL concepts, who can play 16 games and give you 800 yards and 6 touchdowns in his sleep. That's Romeo Doubs. A rookie isn't giving you that. And he brought up a specific stat that I thought was really compelling. He said Doubs in his time in Green Bay caught passes from multiple different quarterbacks, including Jordan Love and others, and maintained a catch rate above 65% throughout his career. That kind of consistency across different quarterback situations suggests that Doubs' reliability isn't dependent on the system or the passer. It's inherent to who he is as a player. And for a Raiders team that might be breaking in a new quarterback, whether that's Cousins or Mendoza, having a receiver whose production isn't dependent on scheme or quarterback is incredibly valuable. Because when everything else is in flux, when the offensive line is still gelling, when the play calling is still being refined, when the quarterback is still figuring out the timing, you need at least one receiver who's going to be in the right spot regardless. Shannon responded by circling back to the draft argument. He said the Raiders have top 30 visits with receivers who profile as legitimate WR1 options, guys with more upside than Doubs. Guys who could be foundational pieces for the next decade, and he said by trading for Doubs, by using draft capital to acquire him, you're essentially taking a pick off the board that could have been used on one of those higher upside options. He said, you're trading a potential all-pro for a known B-plus player, and in a league where the margin between winning and losing is thin, you need A-plus talent, not B-plus reliability. My personal take, I actually think both of them made valid points, but I lean towards Stephen A's side on this one. Here's why. The Raiders have been bad for a long time, and a big part of why they've been bad is because they've consistently chosen potential over production. They've drafted raw athletes and hoped they'd develop. They've taken projects and prayed for breakouts, and more often than not, those bets haven't paid off. Romeo Doubs is the opposite of a bet. He's a known quantity. He runs good routes. He catches the football. He produces consistently. He's not going to transform the franchise, but he's going to give the Raiders something they've desperately needed for years, which is a reliable, professional, consistent wide receiver who can be counted on every single Sunday to do his job at a high level. And for a team that's trying to develop a young quarterback in Mendoza, having that kind of reliability in the receiver room is worth its weight in gold. Think about what Daubs does specifically for the Raiders offense. He slots in as the WR2 behind whoever ends up being the WR1, whether that's a player they draft or someone like Jalen Naylor. In that WR2 role, Daubs provides exactly what the offense needs, which is consistent production on intermediate routes that keep drives alive. He's the guy who catches the 8-yard out on 3rd and 7. He's the guy who finds the soft spot in zone coverage and sits down for an easy completion. He's the guy who positions himself perfectly in the red zone for a back shoulder throw that results in a touchdown. None of those plays are exciting. None of them are going to be the lead highlight on SportsCenter, but every single one of them contributes to winning football games. And there's another angle here that I think is important, which is the quarterback development angle. Fernando Mendoza is going to be a rookie. Rookies make mistakes. They misread coverages. They hold the ball too long. They throw into tight windows that they shouldn't throw into. And when a young quarterback makes a mistake, when he throws a ball that's slightly behind or slightly low, he needs a receiver who adjusts. A receiver who catches the ball even when it's not perfectly placed. A receiver who uses his body to shield the defender and comes down with the football even when the throw isn't ideal. Daubs is that kind of receiver. He's got reliable hands. He adjusts to off-target throws. He doesn't give up on routes when the ball is late. And having that kind of receiver, someone who catches the bad throws as well as the good ones, accelerates a young quarterback's development because it builds confidence. Mendoza throws a slightly off-target ball. Daubs catches it anyway. Mendoza's confidence grows, and he's more willing to make throws in tight windows next time. That development cycle is invaluable for a rookie quarterback. So as I sit here processing everything I just watched, from Gutierrez's report at the facility to the Stephen A. and Shannon debate to my own analysis of the football fit, I believe this deal makes sense for the Raiders. It's not sexy. It's not the move that's going to generate a million retweets, but it's smart. It's calculated. It's the kind of move that winning organizations make, adding reliable, professional, productive players who fill specific roles and make the team better. And for the Raiders, a franchise that has spent years chasing headlines instead of building a roster, this feels like a step in the right direction. Romeo Daubs to the Raiders. It's happening, and Raiders Nation should be excited about it. Subscribe, drop your thoughts in the comments, and stay locked in because the next few hours could bring an official announcement. And when it does, you're going to want to say you heard it here first.